Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to start talking today about what politics is. If you remember last time, we defined a state as that political institution that has a monopoly on the use of force within a clearly defined territory. And we knew all those words, especially by the end of what we talked about last time, except the word political, and I promised you we'd talk about that next time. And so that time has now come. The state, remember, is that political institution that has a monopoly on the legitimate use of force within a clearly defined territory. And the one word we're really going to concern ourselves here, the word that we don't already really understand necessarily, is the word political. So that's what I want to talk about today. What do we mean by political? What is politics? What we looked last time is a little recap of what it is that the state actually does. And basically we saw that in return for our loyalty, in return for our taxes, in return for our payments, essentially the state will provide us with public goods. Now in some very broad way, all of those public goods can be characterized as one of two things. Some people even say it's really just one thing. They provide protection, that is to say the state provides protection, and the state solves collective action problems. Some people who say that the state really just does one thing sort of say, well, solving collective action problems is itself a public good. But more on that next time when we talk about collective action problems. Okay, so if the state is the political institution with a monopoly on the use of force within a clearly defined territory, what do we mean by political? Well, to talk about what politics is, first, as I'll often do, you'll see, here's your definition. Right? Politics is the process by which individual interests are reconciled with collective action and the provision of public goods. Now, when we say interests in this context, we don't mean interest like, my, that's interesting. We mean interests like things that you want or desires that you have. You guys are students, you have an interest in learning. Right? You have an interest that your professors be good. I'm a professor. I'm going to be evaluated based on how well you learn. So I have an interest that you learn. I also just want that. I just desire that. I have an interest that my taxes get spent wisely and particularly on things that I like. So if politics is the process by which individual interests are reconciled with collective action and the provision of public goods, what we mean by those interests are things that people want. Their desires and their and so on. All right, again, if this definition doesn't make complete sense now, that's cool, right? It should make a little sense, and I'd like you to think about it, but by the end of today, it should make a whole lot more sense. Here is a possible public good. A pizza. Anyone ever get together with a group of friends and try to order a pizza? Say you got about 5 of you. You want to order a pizza. What discussion inevitably ensues? The 5 of us get together. We say, you know, let's get a pizza. What do we then end up talking about? What do we want on the pizza? Exactly. What do you like on your pizza?
Basically the typical like supreme, like mushrooms, onion, and then like sausage, pepperoni.
All right, mushrooms, onion, sausage, pepperoni, basically everything but the kitchen sink.
Basically, yeah.
Cool. What do you like on your pizza?
Pepperoni.
Pepperoni? Do you like mushrooms?
No.
Huh. So if you guys want to order a pizza together, you now have some negotiating to do, right? What do you like on your pizza?
Sausage, pepperoni.
Is there anything you really hate?
I'm not a big fan of like peppers or mushrooms.
Okay, not a big fan. So if they're there, you might eat them or you might pick them off, but you're not going to like reject the whole pizza.
Yeah.
Anyone who really hates mushrooms, that like if they're on the pizza, like no way am I touching it? Got it. You know, there's some people who are like that, but for the pepperoni, which is the thing that he really likes. Think about the diversity of interests. There's that word again, used in this context, right? Interests, things that people want, just when it comes to pizzas, right? Each and every one of us, I dare say that no 2 of us in this whole room have identical interests when it comes to pizza, right? Each of us wants a slightly different set of things that are going to come on that pizza. And each of us has a different set of preferences about those things. So, you love pepperoni. You really want the pepperoni there. If that pepperoni's there, it's not even a pizza. You'll eat pepperoni, but it's whatever. You don't so much, or you want the mushrooms. Someone didn't care for mushrooms. Oh, that was you. You didn't like mushrooms. And then you were like, I'm not going to eat it if it even has mushrooms on it. So it's not even just what we want and what we don't want, but sort of the intensity of feelings that come along with those desires or those interests, right? Included in our interests in a way is how much we want the thing or don't want the thing. Well, when I talk about politics being the process by which we reconcile, right, sort of come together individual interests with the provision of a single public good, think about it, right? If we were going to order one pizza, what kind of pizza would we get, right? Different ones of us would want different things on those pizzas, but in the end, there's going to be one pizza, one public good, one collective action, right? The pizza that we buy and then provide, and yet it somehow has to take into account the fact that you like your pizza with olives, you won't even touch olives, you're a vegetarian, you're not a vegetarian, but you don't really love meat, and you love olives, and if there aren't olives on it, forget it, and you're lactose intolerant and don't want the cheese. Right? We each have individual interests, and yet when you buy a pizza, typically, unless it's an individual pizza, you end up in a situation where one public good is going to be provided. And we all have to share that particular public good, even though we each have different individual interests. And what politics is the process by which we figure out what single public good we're going to get, sort of despite the fact that we each have a very different set of individual interests, a very different set of toppings that we want on the pizza. And that doesn't even get to the fact of how big a pizza we're going to get. Are we going to get the extra large or the large, or where we're going to get it, or how many we're going to get, or whatever the case may be. Now, of course, in real politics, in state politics, the public goods that the state provides aren't pizzas typically, but things like protection, right? We talked about this. The state wants to provide protection, but there's all these individual interests about what kind of protection the state should provide, in which context it should use that protection, how much money it should spend on providing that protection in the first place, and where and when we should use those protective forces, right? Do we use them to get the bad guys? Who are the bad guys? Do we use them to make sure we have enough oil for our cars? Here's where the different interests start to come into play. Almost everybody agrees that the state should provide protection, but we all end up having very different interests when it comes to where should this protection be used, how much money should we spend on it, where should we use it, against whom, and how much, and in what ways. One of the things the state provides is law and order, right? The state hires police officers to protect us from each other. It establishes courts of law to determine if anybody is breaking the laws that the state establishes and what should be done to them, including how should we punish those people who break those laws. But again, even though most of us would agree that the state should play some role providing laws and law and order for society, we might disagree about the laws it should have or about what should happen to people who break those laws. The state provides transportation and infrastructure. It builds roads and freeways and ports and airports and railroads and so on. Sometimes private industry does these things too, but it's certainly a big part of what the state does. The state builds a lighthouse. Some of us who are in shipping have an interest that lighthouses get built. Some of us who buy the things that get shipped in also have an interest in that. But of course, if we own a port over here on the West Coast and you own a port over there on the East Coast and there's only enough money for one lighthouse, we might have very different interests about where and how big that lighthouse is. We want water management, right? Could you imagine what life would be like if we each had like individual, we were each responsible for providing for our own water? Each of us have to set up like a water collection unit on our house. Imagine if you had to deal with your own sewage and put it away. Right? It's better for all of us that the state build pipes to bring the water in, to hold it until we need it, and to carry it away once it's dirty. State provides waste management, right? We don't each want a mini little landfill in our backyard, right? It's better if we just sort of pay one set of guys to come to all our houses, collect the garbage, and put it away. Somewhere far away where it's not going to get us sick. It's better for all of us that the state provide this public good. And yet we might have different interests about how often they should do the trash pickup, or how much we should pay for it, or if they should also do recycling. Yeah? Well, some of them are managed by private industry, and so that right there is another question, right? We all have an interest that our garbage get picked up and put away somewhere far away from the city. Do we all want to collectively pay for it? Or do we want it be up to individuals to contract with businesses that might do it for you? If we do the latter, well, you might have more tolerance for garbage piling up in your yard than I do. Well, and that's okay, right? Then we've made the decision that you have garbage in your yard and I don't have it in mine. But if your garbage in your yard is going to make me sick, I might actually want to have an interest in having it be provided uniformly by the state. But you might still be saying, no, I don't even want that pizza. And yet the pizza is going to be provided. We all paid our dues to the fraternity's going to buy the pizza. You're paying for that pizza anyway, whether you want it or not, at some level. And so a political process is going to be involved even in just deciding, are we going to buy pizza collectively or not? Good question. Public education. Again, most of us agree that at some level the government should provide for some sort of education. It's better for all of us that most of us learn how to read and to do very basic adding and subtracting, but we can argue very legitimate arguments on both sides how much education the state should provide, up to what level, and for whom, and how many people. And so this is sort of the upshot, that no matter how basic it may seem any of these public goods or services are, there's almost always some diversity of interests. Here's something that I think, I'm just saying we all have individual interests, right? But here's something I think we would like all agree on, right? That among the things that the government tells the police officers to enforce, right, among the laws that the government's going to have, that among those laws the government should say, basically, thou shalt not kill. I think anybody, even the most small government libertarian, thinks that murder should remain illegal. Agreed? Okay. It's kind of a little extreme to say, no, even murder shouldn't be illegalized. It's up to individuals to regulate that, right? All right, fine. So we all agree that murder should be illegal, like that shouldn't be allowed. The government should step in and stop it from happening and should step in to punish people who actually do it anyway. Fine. And I think we all agree that those laws against murder should apply to people like this. This is actually just a random group of Wabash students. Murdering Wabash students should be as illegal as murdering everybody else. I think we all agree on that. I think we agree it should apply to these people. These are high school students. Notice they don't vote, but it should still apply to them. Even to that dude on the right in the stonewashed jeans, which were very in style then. It should even apply to little people like that. She doesn't even know she's being protected by laws like this, right? That you can't murder people. But we all agree, I think, that it should apply to her too, right? That when the government tells the police, thou shalt not murder, they should include in that rule the murder of little people who don't even know they're being protected by that law, including my niece. But should it apply to these people? Well, I don't know. Kind of depends if you even think those are people. And now we get into the world where some of us think they are, and thus they should be included in what that law protects, and some of us think they aren't, and thus it doesn't matter. And I'm not here to tell you which way is right. This isn't a politics class, right? This is a political science class. This is a class where we learn the process by which these decisions are made. You go home and on your own decide which way you actually want it to be. But what I'm here to tell you is that whether you like it or not, you are making that decision. Every time you vote, every time you pick the leaders you want, you're picking leaders and you're telling them, look, I want you to have a law that thou shalt not murder. We all agree on that law, but guess what? We all now have to take a position on whether that law should be applied to things like this or not. And each of us may have a very different set of interests. Some of us may think, yeah, it should even apply to those things, but not to those things, which is just that thing at an earlier stage of development. But of course, to some people, that thing is really just that thing at a later stage of development, right? And, you know, that thing is really just that thing at a later, you can go on and on. We all agree, I think, at some basic level that the government should be involved in establishing protection, right? To protect us from outside powers, to protect us from each other. But who's the people we're being protected from? Who are the people against whom we should use our defense, our offense, right? Should we use it to bomb countries that don't attack us first? Should we even use it to bomb at countries that do attack us first? Well, that's where you get diversity of interest. Should we use it against these people or these people? They just seem to be minding their own business, and yet militaries have been used against people like that too, by which I mean just sort of innocent people who belong to the racial or religious or ethnic group that most of the people in the state decide they don't like. Most of us agree that the state should establish schools, right, and some amount of education, right? But the schools have to decide whether they're going to teach that our great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was her or her. And now, even if we all agree that the schools should provide education, we're still going to have different interests in terms of what particular type of education the state provides. For the last time, right? I'm not here to tell you which one of those was our great-great-great-great. That's up to you. I'm here to tell you that if we all get what we want, which is public schools, I imagine most of us want some level of public schools, we're going to then have that diversity over what those schools teach. Different interests. Some guys want pepperoni, some guys don't want pepperoni, some guys really hate pepperoni, and some guys, you know, they don't want it, but they'll eat it. Sometimes it's not a matter of whether you oppose or support something. It's not that simple, right? Everybody likes the environment. I hate to break it to you. Even Republicans like the environment. The question is how much money you want to spend protecting it. That's where people agree or disagree, right? I mean, everybody, if they had their way, like bald eagles, wouldn't be extinct. I think there's very few people who want animals to go extinct. But there's a lot of people who think we shouldn't use public funding to protect them. And then there's a lot of people who think we should. There's a lot of people who think the endangered species that you're killing is really, well, you want to kill it, you kill it. It's just an animal. Then there's other people who say, wait, but if you kill all of them, there are none left for me to enjoy. And so I actually want that common decision to include even your individual actions. Taxes, right? Nobody likes paying taxes, right? Nobody wants taxes. We just disagree on how much our taxes should be and on where that tax money should get spent. Okay, so if politics is the process by which individual interests are reconciled with collective action and the provision of public goods, then government is the set of individuals and institutions that make those political decisions. Institutions are the organizations and the rules, and sometimes even the traditions that government establishes or that we as a society live by. And I want you to note something a little different about our use of this word. Typically, we understand that the word institution means something like an organization, but in comparative politics, we will also use the word institution to refer to the laws that those organizations pass and the rules that those organizations themselves live by. So the U.S. Senate is an institution, so too are the laws that the U.S. Senate helps pass in this context. In fact, there are two kinds of laws, broadly speaking. You have statutory laws, the laws of everyday life, the laws that we see and think about most often, right? Don't walk on the grass, thou shalt not kill, your taxes are going to be this much, and so on and so forth. But sometimes it'll be important that we contrast those with a different kind of law, constitutional laws, which are the rules that determine how the rules are going to be made. The president has to stand for election every 4 years. Each state gets 2 senators, no matter how big or how small it is. Right? Those are rules too. Those are institutions too. But those institutions really govern how the people who make the other rules get their jobs and how they end up serving. Notice that all political decisions really end up involving winners and losers. Right? We decide on that pizza. We decide that it's going to have pepperoni on it. Somewhere, there's somebody who didn't want pepperoni. They lost that time. Well, we could decide that it shouldn't have pepperoni, but somewhere there's somebody who really wanted pepperoni, and that guy loses. You know, sort of like everybody wants public transportation, kinda. I mean, we all, like none of us would really be that much worse off if there was a subway system in our city. Maybe not this city. But, you know, and in the end, it doesn't even cost very much, right? Like a couple extra tax dollars. I'm talking in a real, this is actually the San Diego public transport system. So it's like, you know, a bigger city that would really benefit from that. It only costs a couple dollars per person. Even if you're not going to use it, it might be worth a couple dollars to not have the traffic or to have other people you know be able to get around a little bit more easily. But yet, even here, you're going to have groups of people who oppose those things, right? I don't know, taxi cab companies, auto companies, people who sell gasoline, and so on. We might all agree that lighthouses are good. Again, if you own a shipping company, you certainly agree that lighthouses are a good thing. But guess what? All of us buy stuff that ends up getting shipped in, and that stuff that we buy is cheaper and comes in more reliably because we have ports and because we have lighthouses and because the whole process of shipping stuff in is easier and cheaper. It benefits all of us. And yet we're going to have diversity of opinion as to where those lighthouses should go. And even if we put them there, we're going to have people in places like that who want them but didn't get them. So even on these things that we all agree on, right, there's going to be winners and losers, people who don't get exactly what they want. We're going to order pizzas, and some of us aren't going to get, in fact, very few of us will get exactly the pizza we want. Note that interests can be concentrated or they can be diffuse. Now, in this context, these words are it's a little unusual to use them in this context, but in politics we do. But we know what concentrated and diffuse is, right? If a chemical is concentrated, there's a lot of it in a little small space. If it's diffuse, there's the same amount of it, but it's all spread out with only a little bit per same unit of space or area. So diffuse interests are interests that many, many people have, but they only care about it a little bit. Concentrated interests are interests that maybe a smaller number of people have, but they really care a lot. And here's an example right there. I sort of gave it to you, right? We all kind of would benefit from there being a subway system or public transportation. It's only a couple dollars, and in the end, it does us all a little bit of good. It relieves traffic and so on. But these people lose out a lot, right? They lose a big chunk of their business. So whereas it may be that a lot of us kind of want the convenience of public transportation, there are going to be a few of us that really, really don't want it. A diffuse interest in having public transportation, a concentrated interest in not having it. Doesn't always work that way, but there's an example. Here's another example. This is just the way it is. I'm not publicizing a personal political preference here. It's just the way it is. If you poll Americans, if you ask Americans how they feel about abortion, about 66% of Americans think that abortion should be legal in the first 3 months of pregnancy. And about 29% say it shouldn't be. Again, this isn't necessarily my view on things. This is just what happens if you poll the American public. But here's my question. Why do we even then talk about it? Shouldn't abortion just be legal by this measure? I'm not saying should like I think it should be, but just shouldn't it like if we have a democracy and there's voting, and 66% of the people want something and the other 29% don't, like, isn't that just what you would expect to happen? That, okay, abortion's legal, end of discussion, we'll talk about taxes now. Why do we have a public discussion on an issue where the public is so disproportionately on one side of the issue?
There are a lot of other competing interests when elected officials are making decisions. So like the reading pointed out that there are interest groups and lobbyists and other people who impact what happens in government.
You want to elaborate on that?
Not necessarily on that, but I think it goes back to concentrated and diffuse interest. Because abortion is just so, I feel like it can be passionate between like opposing it or supporting it. Not supporting it, but like having the option open.
Right. Go on. You want to add to that?
It's the silent majority and the vocal minority that's what really just drives the discussion.
There you go, right? Different words for the same thing, right? The silent majority and the vocal minority, right? It turns out that people who oppose abortion, a lot of them anyway, really, really oppose it. It's like me with anchovies on my pizza. I'm not even picking them off and eating the thing. I am not touching if there are anchovies on that thing, the way you are with mushrooms, right? Everybody else, they may not like anchovies, maybe even they want them, but they just want them a little bit. Well, it turns out that typically in the sort of pro-choice camp, people kind of want abortion to be legal, but they don't really care about it that much, or at least not as much as the people who oppose it, who really care about it and think it should definitely be illegal. And so think about how that then happens when it comes to voting. This is where your answer comes in, right? If I'm pro-choice, but I just kind of care about it a little, and I've got this guy who's pro-life, but I like him on all the other issues. And I got this guy who's pro-choice, like he's in line with me, but actually I don't like him on the other issues. You know, if the choice life thing is if something I want, but I don't really care about that much, I'll still vote for him based on the other issues. Well, the pro-life crowd, right? They feel passionately. This is a concentrated interest. And for them, it's going to be like, wait, you're pro-life? I can disagree with you on everything else, but if you're pro-life, I'm going to vote for you. This is, I mean, I'm simplifying this a little bit, but that's the general gist of it, right? You see how a concentrated interest, though held by fewer people, might result in more public officials getting elected based on that view. Free trade kind of works this way too. Most everybody benefits from free trade. After all, it's just an option, right? But a few people are disadvantaged by it, and they're disadvantaged a lot. Notice that institutions really, they actually really do affect the public goods that we get. And here I'm talking about institutions as the rules for how we make the rules for how we decide. All right, we want to order a pizza. What's a concentrated interest that you've no doubt seen people who have this very concentrated interest when it comes to pizza and what kinds of toppings you get? A minority group who nonetheless feel very strongly about their particular preferences with toppings and so on. Vegetarians. Right? They're a dietary minority. They're not the majority, especially now. I used to teach in California. The world was different there. But I'm in Indiana now. And vegetarians are definitely a minority. But they feel really passionately. I'm not a vegetarian. I like pepperoni on my pizza. But I'll give it or take it or leave it. You know, if I could just not get anchovies, I'll take the pepperoni off, right? If you could not get mushrooms, you'd take all the other vegetables, right? The vegetarians, they're not going to eat it if it's got meat on it, typically. So you have a world where you have carnivores and you have vegetarians. And this world has 13 carnivores and 7 vegetarians. Vegetarians are a minority. About 35% of the small population of this society. All right, well, if we're going to order 5 pizzas for this society, one way to resolve this problem of many, many individual interests in the provision of a single public good is to vote on it. Now, if you vote on it in this society, 5 pizzas, how many pizzas do you think would end up being meat pizzas and how many would be vegetarian pizzas? Any guesses? 2 vegetarian, 3 carnivores. Well, let's try it out. All right, we're going to order 5 pizzas, people. Order the way you want, right? First pizza. How many people want a meat pizza? Raise your hand. All right. Hands down. How many people want a vegetarian pizza? Oh, okay. Well, better luck next time. Second pizza. How many people want a meat pizza? Raise your hand. Okay, hands down. How many people want a vegetarian pizza? Yeah, okay, 2, 3. All right, third pizza. How many people want a meat pizza? All right, third pizza. How many people want a vegetarian pizza? Okay, but you know, you told us that really it's going to be 3 to 2, so now it's time for a vegetarian pizza, right? But vote the way you want. How many people want a meat pizza? Oh, wait. How many people want that vegetarian pizza? It's the 4th pizza. Oh, we have a word for your situation. It's called SOL. Wait, 5th pizza though, right? How many people want, like now, it's the last chance for the vegetarians. How many people want a meat pizza? Right, how many people want, okay, you get the point, right? Like voting isn't always going to guarantee that a small minority in society, or even a relatively sizable minority, is going to get anything, right? And if you just vote on it, you might end up with a situation where the majority gets everything, not just what proportionally it would be due. Now you can try to solve for this situation. In fact, this is a situation that we call tyranny of the majority. We know what a majority is, mostly. And tyranny is really something that's not good, right? It involves some kind of oppression. But here you go. What kind of oppression is it when the majority of us want it? When the majority of us want meat on our pizza and we order 5 meat pizzas because, after all, the majorities win and we do have a democracy, what's the situation that the vegetarians are in? That SOL situation, right? Well, they might argue that it's tyranny of the majority. That, yeah, sure, it was all democratic, but I have some rights to at least 1 pizza here. Well, how can you guarantee that when you also have democracy? The answer is it's very hard, and in some ways we're going to spend the next month grappling with that very question. One way that governments attempt to grapple with that question is by dividing the power that the government itself has. Some countries, like our country, are divided federally, right? We have the United States, but we're broken down into 50 little states, and even some sort of semi-autonomous districts, like the District of Columbia. If we basically say, look, the rules will be made on a local level, well then, assuming, and sometimes this is safe to assume, that people with similar interests end up living concentrated and closer together to one another, then they might get the kinds of pizzas they want in their regions, and we'll get the kinds of pizzas we want in our regions. So if instead you say in this society, look, we'll divide ourselves up federally into 5 districts, and now have each district decide on what pizza it's going to have, well, now we get 3 carnivorous pizzas or meat pizzas and 2 vegetarian pizzas. Now we get something that's closer to the proportions that people are in society. Note, still not exact. In fact, this is a situation where the carnivores might complain, because how many of the pizzas now are vegetarian? What by percentage? What percentage of the pizzas are vegetarian? 40%. What percentage of the population is vegetarian? 20 of the minority, oh my. Now it's less proportionally, but you're still going to have people arguing even this way that there's something unfair, right? Collective decisions inevitably are going to leave some people without the kind of pizza they want. And now, of course, in real government, in real societies, the kinds of toppings people want are not pepperoni and sausage and no anchovies and, yes, green peppers and certainly not olives or something like that. Right? The interests we have are about the common political issues that we think about all the time. Should taxes be raised or lowered? Should drugs be illegal or legalized? If they are illegal, what should the penalties be? Should the federal government make rules about drugs at all, or should that be left to the states? Should we invade this country or not? Should we invade a country but not that one? It should be this one instead. Should we only invade this kind of country? Countries with oil in it. Country with a minority group in it that we like. Countries with a minority in it that we don't like. Whatever the case may be. So what I'd like you to think about next time, right, is that we've seen the governments do these things, right? Governments provide protection from others and from each other. They write and they enforce laws. They establish public goods like transportation and infrastructure and so on and so forth. But there's this other thing that governments do. They solve collective action problems. And that's what we're going to talk about next time. All right, questions. We got some questions as we were going, and I'm glad for that. But, you know, even in a big class like this, I like to take a few minutes at the end of class for questions.